7 years. That's how long I gave myself to this marriage, to Daniel. I poured my heart into our home, our routines, our little traditions. I knew the rhythm of his laugh, the way he liked his coffee, the sigh he made before falling asleep. But lately, he's been off, short-tempered, glued to his phone like it held the meaning of life. I told myself it was work stress, or maybe a midlife slump, but deep down, I already knew. I just didn't want to. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday, of course. I was doing laundry, nothing dramatic, just folding shirts and emptying pockets. Then I felt something stiff tucked inside his jacket. I pulled it out, a hotel receipt. My stomach sank, and then came the jewelry box. Velvet, elegant, almost mocking. Inside was a bracelet I had never seen in my life. Not on a birthday, not on our anniversary. I stood there, holding proof, and oddly, I didn't fall apart. I just went still. That night, once he'd passed out with his phone still glowing beside him, I got up. I wasn't even shaking. I just opened his messages. Deleted ones, of course, but not well hidden. And there it was. Her name, their chats, the details, the lies. It was all there, plain as day. And in that moment, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I smiled. Not because I was okay, but because, somehow, he had just handed me the gift I didn't know I needed. I sat in the dark for a while, just listening to the silence. It was strange. I expected to feel rage, betrayal, something explosive. But instead, there was a quiet calm wrapping itself around me. Like my body had been bracing for an earthquake, and now that it had finally hit, I was still standing. All those little moments I had doubted myself, thinking I was too sensitive, too paranoid, suddenly made sense. I wasn't crazy, I was right. And that truth, it gave me power. In the morning, I made him coffee, just like always. I even kissed his cheek. He didn't notice a thing. He never really did he? He sat at the table, tapping away on his phone, lying through his teeth about meetings and deadlines. And I just watched him, really looked at him. Not the man I fell in love with, but the man he'd become. Self-absorbed, distracted, lazy with his deception, and all I could think was, she can have him. But I wasn't going to play the cliché. No messy confrontations, no screaming in restaurants or throwing his clothes onto the lawn. I wanted something cleaner, sharper. I didn't just want to leave. I wanted to make a statement, one that would echo. So I started paying attention, watching how he typed her name, the flowers he once sent, the places he went when he said he was at work. I gathered the pieces like a puzzle, and piece by piece, the plan started to bloom. The more I uncovered, the less I flinched. Her name was Vanessa. I found it in his contacts, saved under something pathetic like consulting lead. She lived a few neighborhoods over, apparently liked white lilies and red wine. I even found a dinner reservation he made for their anniversary. The audacity made me laugh, a real bitter laugh that echoed off my kitchen walls. It wasn't heartbreak I felt anymore. It was liberation, laced with just enough mischief to keep me going. It's funny how invisible I must have become to him. Like I'd stopped existing the moment I stopped being convenient. But oh, I was paying attention now. To everything. To every careless text. Every whispered call in the hallway. Every fake smile after he tucked his phone away. And each little detail didn't break me. It built me. Stronger, smarter, more focused than I'd been in years. He thought he was in control, but I was already steps ahead. So I kept my voice soft, my smile warm, my schedule predictable. All the while, I was planning something he'd never see coming. Not a scene, not revenge in the way he'd expect. No, I had something else in mind. Something poetic, precise, a goodbye wrapped in silk and thorns. And the best part? He'd never even realize it was coming until it had already arrived. I became two women at once. The wife he thought he still had, gentle, steady, smiling over coffee, and the woman who had woken up, sharpened by betrayal, quietly setting everything into motion. It was almost theatrical, the way he played his part without realizing I'd rewritten the script. Every late meeting was just more confirmation. Every fake apology a reminder that I wasn't crazy. I wasn't broken. I was done pretending not to know. The first thing I did was dig deeper. I learned her last name through an old payment he made on our joint account. Sloppy. A quick search led me to her profile. Vanessa liked sharing everything. Where she worked, where she jogged, her favorite brunch spot. She even posted the bouquet Daniel gave her last Valentine's. Red roses and white lilies. I memorized every detail, every preference. I wasn't collecting information. I was crafting something precise, something unforgettable. I never cried. Not once. Not when I saw her face. Not when I realized how long it had been going on. I just kept moving, steady, focused, almost graceful in my silence. I smiled at neighbors. I answered his texts with little hearts. I kissed him goodnight. But behind my calm, I was stitching together something beautiful. Because sometimes, the most devastating messages aren't shouted. They're delivered in silence, with flowers, a ribbon, and just the right words. I still remember the sound of the florist's voice when I called. Warm, cheerful, the kind of voice that had no idea it was about to help deliver the softest kind of justice. I asked if they had a delivery service. I gave the name, the address, the exact flower arrangement. Red roses, white lilies, nothing more, nothing less. Would you like to include a card? She asked. I paused, not because I didn't know what to say, but because I wanted every single word to land like a whisper that turns into thunder. I wrote the message slowly. I wanted it to sting, not bleed. I wanted her to read it twice, once with pride, and again with the sinking feeling that she'd just been handed the truth. Thank you for taking this weight off my shoulders. Not rage, not insults, just a nudge, like I was passing a torch she had no idea was already burning out. The florist chuckled when I signed it. That's bold, she said. That's closure, I replied. Back home, Daniel walked in later that evening like nothing had changed. He dropped his keys on the counter, kissed my cheek, asked what was for dinner, and I smiled, genuinely, easily. Because I already knew. I knew that soon, another woman would open her door and receive what she thought was love, wrapped in cellophane and tied with a bow. And I hoped, just for a second, she'd feel it. The weight of the truth I was about to send her way. I didn't rush it. Timing mattered. I waited until Friday, the day he usually claimed he was staying late. I pictured her lighting candles, maybe spritzing perfume, waiting for a man who was never fully hers to begin with. And while he was off spinning more half-truths, I confirmed the delivery. Scheduled for 3 p.m. sharp. I pictured the florist's van pulling up to her door, the box being handed over gently, like it carried something precious. It did, just not in the way she expected. That night, I was almost giddy. I made dinner. I laughed at his bad jokes. He had no clue. Not a single crack in my mask, but inside, I could feel something blooming. Not anger, not revenge. Something lighter, a sense of clarity. I wasn't sending flowers out of spite. I was sending them as a final gesture, a poetic shift in ownership. I had carried this man's weight for far too long. Now, someone else could try. When I went to bed, I didn't check his phone. I didn't need to. Whatever happened next was already in motion. And the best part? I wouldn't have to lift another finger. Because sometimes, truth doesn't scream. It arrives wrapped in elegance, delivered with a smile, and signed with the calm hand of a woman who's finally done being deceived. I imagined her face when she opened the door. Maybe she smiled at first. Who wouldn't? An elegant bouquet delivered in the middle of the day. No occasion, no warning. Red roses, bold and romantic. White lilies, graceful and pure. It probably looked like love. Maybe she thought Daniel was finally making a grand gesture. Maybe she even held them close, let herself believe she'd won something. But tucked inside that beauty was a truth she wasn't ready for. The card was handwritten. I made sure of that. A printed message would have felt cold, distant. But my words? They needed to feel personal. Thank you for taking this weight off my shoulders. Not cruel, not sarcastic, just honest. And right beneath it, the part I knew would echo in her mind long after the flowers wilted. May you enjoy every lie, every late night, and every empty promise. Claire. That was my truth, handed to her like a ribbon-tied confession. I didn't check her social media right away. I didn't need the validation. But a few hours later, it found me anyway. Screenshots being passed around in group chats, then popping up on feeds. Her post, a close-up of the bouquet, the card front and center. Comments poured in like wildfire. This is art. Queen behavior. She didn't cry. She delivered. I sat there, watching strangers cheer for a story they didn't even know belonged to me, and I felt something rare. Peace. The internet can be cruel, but that day, it felt like an unexpected wave of sisterhood. Women I didn't know, from cities I'd never visit, were clapping for me with their keyboards. They saw the strength in my silence, the message between the lines. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel invisible. I felt seen, not as the betrayed wife, not as a victim, but as someone who had taken back the narrative without screaming or begging. I was reclaiming myself, one petal at a time. Of course, Daniel had no idea yet. He was still walking through the world like a man in control of his story. But that story had just been rewritten without his permission, and I wasn't waiting for his reaction. I was done reacting. My part had been played, and now it was his turn to face the echo. I imagined her reading the card over and over, trying to understand if it was kindness or cruelty. But that was the beauty of it. It was neither. It was clarity. I didn't feel petty. I felt precise. There's something powerful about delivering the truth in a way that's undeniable. No drama, no chaos. Just a single moment that cracks the mask open. Vanessa hadn't stolen anything from me. She'd inherited a man I no longer wanted. And now she was holding the proof, not just in flowers, but in every carefully chosen word I left behind. I wasn't bitter. I was free. And I had just sent my silence wrapped in fragrance and fire. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine and watched the sun dip below the horizon like it was taking the past with it. The house was quiet, but not heavy. Just still, like it was holding its breath. I sat by the window, letting the hum of the evening settle around me, and thought about how far I'd come in just a few days. There was no plan to burn his life down, no vengeance tantrum, just small, deliberate steps toward peace. My version of closure didn't need chaos. It just needed truth. Somewhere across town, I imagined her holding that bouquet, rereading the card, maybe pacing her apartment, trying to make sense of what she'd just received. I wondered if she'd ask him about it. If he'd lie, if she'd believe him, or if the seed of doubt I planted would quietly start to bloom, like a weed in the middle of what she thought was a garden. That was the thing about deception. It never stays neat. It spreads, and eventually, it consumes. And me? I was already packing. Not just my things, but my peace, my self-respect, my future. I folded clothes with care, not grief. I placed books into boxes without hesitation. Every item I touched, I asked myself, do I want to carry this into my new life? Daniel didn't know it yet, but this wasn't just a message for her. It was the start of my exit. Quiet, graceful, permanent. The morning I left, the sky was that pale gray that makes everything feel suspended, like even the weather knew something was ending. I moved through the house like a ghost, barefoot, deliberate, almost reverent. I didn't slam doors or shatter picture frames. I didn't leave mess or noise behind, just space where my presence used to be. I had packed slowly over the past few days, little by little, until only what was mine remained. And now it was time to carry that part of me somewhere new. The bedroom looked bigger without my things. No books on the nightstand, no hairbrush by the mirror, just emptiness. And him, still asleep, blissfully unaware. I stood in the doorway and looked at him one last time. Not with sadness, not even anger. Just detachment. The kind that settles in after you've cried all your tears long before goodbye. I didn't need to wake him. I didn't owe him a monologue. He'd feel it the moment he opened his eyes and realized the silence was permanent. On the kitchen table, I left a single sheet of paper. No flourish, no apology, just my truth, the one he never cared to ask for. You never deserved me. Now you can have her, and everything else that comes with you. I didn't sign it. I didn't need to. He would know. He'd read it again and again, searching for some version of me that might still care. But that version was gone. The one who stayed, the one who begged, the one who believed, all gone. I didn't look back when I closed the door. Not once. There was no cinematic pause, no tears brimming in my eyes, just the sound of the lock clicking into place, final, quiet, satisfying. My car was already packed. Every item chosen with intention, like I was curating a new version of myself. I didn't take everything, just what mattered. Clothes I loved, books that had comforted me, photographs where I looked truly happy, not the forced smiles beside a man who barely noticed I was fading. The apartment I moved into wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. Small, sunlit, imperfect in all the right ways. The kind of place where I could start over without the weight of pretending. I opened the windows wide and let the breeze sweep through every room, like an exhale I'd been holding for years. I set a coffee mug on the counter, played music I hadn't heard in forever, and watched the dust settle in unfamiliar corners. And for the first time in so long, I felt light. Then came the brunch invites. From women I hadn't seen in months, maybe years. They'd noticed the card online. They had questions. But more than that, they had warmth. They remembered me before I disappeared into Daniel's world, before I dimmed my light to make him feel bigger. And I said yes. I said yes to every coffee date, every late breakfast, every spontaneous walk in the park. Because piece by piece, I wasn't just leaving him, I was returning to myself. I didn't check in on him, not once. I didn't ask mutual friends how he was coping. I didn't scroll through his profiles or try to gauge his reaction. That part of my life was closed. Not out of pride, but peace. And yet, I knew exactly what the silence was doing. I knew how loud it must have felt for him. No calls, no texts, no dramatic confrontation he could twist into victimhood. Just absence. And the note. That one line, sitting alone on the kitchen table like a mirror he couldn't avoid. Every day in my new place brought back little pieces of joy I didn't realize I had lost. The slow mornings, the freedom to cook whatever I wanted. Reading late into the night without tiptoeing, laughing out loud at old sitcoms. It was like I had been underwater for years, and now I was breathing again. Nobody demanding, nobody dismissing, just quiet, the kind that heals instead of hurts. I wasn't rebuilding a life. I was building one that had never been fully mine to begin with, and even in the quiet, I could feel something new taking root. Not revenge, not bitterness. Something softer, something stronger. A freedom that came from letting go, of him, of the pain, of the version of me that tolerated less than I deserved. And while I didn't know exactly what would come next, I knew one thing for sure. The chapter with his name in it was over. And the next one? It was going to be mine, from the very first word. It started with one message, then another, and another. Missed calls, voicemails that stretched into desperate rambles. Claire, please call me. It's not what you think. We need to talk. I didn't even flinch. I watched the notifications pile up like unread chapters from a book I'd already finished. He was scrambling, trying to rewrite history, to soften the edges of his betrayal. But I wasn't interested in revisions. I had lived through the truth, and now I was writing something new, without him. There was a strange satisfaction in not replying, not because I wanted to punish him, but because I didn't owe him anything. I had already said what needed to be said, once, clearly, and silence was my final sentence. He had made his choices, and now he had to sit in the echo of them. I pictured him pacing, phone in hand, confused by my calm. He expected a fight, drama, maybe even a breakdown. But what he got instead was the sound of a woman who had finally moved on. One morning, while sipping coffee on my little balcony, I posted a photo. Nothing dramatic. Just me, glowing, wine glass in hand, laughing under the soft light of a vineyard afternoon. The caption was simple. Turns out letting go of garbage makes room for the good stuff. No names, no details. But everyone knew. The comments rolled in like warm hugs. Thriving. Glowing. She understood the assignment. I didn't need to explain. They felt it. And so did I. The beautiful part wasn't the vineyard or the comments or the glow in my cheeks. It was the feeling inside me, like something had finally unclenched. I wasn't performing happiness. I wasn't trying to convince anyone I was okay. I was okay. More than that, I was light. Lighter than I'd felt in years. Every moment now felt like a quiet celebration. A morning coffee without tension. A slow walk without checking the time. Even silence felt different. Not empty, but full of possibility. I started saying yes more. Yes to brunch invites. Yes to little weekend trips. Yes to laughing too loud and staying out a little too late. I let myself rediscover the parts of me I had tucked away to make room for him. The woman who danced while cooking, who wore bold lipstick for no reason, who took herself out to bookstores just because. I was meeting myself again, not with shame for the years I lost, but with gratitude that I finally came back. And then, just when I wasn't looking for it, something arrived. A knock at the door, a delivery man, flowers in hand. I raised an eyebrow. "For Claire," he said with a knowing smile. The arrangement was different this time. Soft peonies, eucalyptus, a splash of wildflower yellow. And the note? Simple, kind, honest. Not from Daniel, from someone new. Someone whose name I hadn't even mentioned yet, but whose presence had been gently growing in the background of my life. I held the card in my hands a moment longer than I needed to, not because I was hesitant, but because I was present. I read the words again, slowly this time. For no reason other than I thought of you, and smiled. No grand declaration, no promises, just something soft, something sincere. And in that small gesture, I felt seen in a way I hadn't in years. Not as someone's wife, not as someone's second thought, just as me, Claire. And that was enough. I placed the flowers in the center of my table, next to a new book and a half-empty mug of tea. There was no need to photograph them, no urge to post. This moment wasn't for applause. It was for me, a reminder that I hadn't just survived. I had bloomed, in quiet, unexpected ways. That even after betrayal, even after loss, life could still offer beauty. Not because someone handed it to me, but because I created space for it. I made room for better. And maybe this new someone would stay. Maybe they wouldn't. But I knew this much. I'd never again shrink to fit inside someone else's story. I had found my voice in the silence, my power in the stillness. And as I opened the window and let the warm air drift in, I knew something for certain. I wasn't waiting to be chosen anymore. I was the choice. Finally, fully, and without apology.
My name is Wendy Moore, and I'm 29 years old. For the longest time, I believed my life was enough. Not flashy, not remarkable, just steady. I worked as a network administrator, a job that kept the lights on and food in the fridge. My schedule was predictable, stable hours, good pay, health insurance. It wasn't exciting, but it gave me the kind of quiet comfort I thought everyone secretly wanted. For 5 years, I shared that life with Daniel. To me, we were a team. We had our little rituals, lazy Sunday mornings with coffee evenings, where I'd lose myself in cooking elaborate meals just to see him smile. He always said my lasagna was the highlight of his week. We had inside jokes no one else would understand, shared silences that felt warm instead of awkward. I thought we were happy. I thought he was happy. But love doesn't vanish overnight. It erodes slowly like water carving into stone. The first cracks began when Daniel reconnected with an old college friend. Suddenly, our quiet nights in were replaced by invitations to gallery openings, rooftop parties, and noisy warehouse gatherings filled with people who spoke in riddles about artistic freedom and living untethered. I tried to keep up at first, smiling, nodding, even asking questions. But inside, I felt like an outsider intruding on a world that didn't belong to me. Daniel, meanwhile, seemed intoxicated by it all. He'd come home buzzing, rambling about seizing the moment and breaking routines. One night, he looked at me across the dinner table, his eyes sharper than I remembered. "Wendy, don't you ever want more than this?" he asked, his tone half curious, half accusing. I blinked, unsure how to respond. More debt, more instability, more loneliness in crowded rooms. I told him softly, "I'm happy. Isn't that enough?" He sighed dismissively, already reaching for his phone. That was the first time I felt the distance between us, a gap so subtle it almost didn't exist, but wide enough to let in a draft of cold air. The breaking point came at one of those parties. A repurposed warehouse exposed brick, harsh lighting music that rattled my chest instead of lifting my spirit. Daniel was in his element, drifting between clusters of artists, laughing too loudly, throwing his arm around people I'd never met. I lingered near the drinks table, clutching a cup of warm beer, trying to ground myself. A man wearing a scarf indoors cornered me, rambling about a performance piece involving fire and silence. I nodded politely, but my eyes searched the room for Daniel. When I spotted him, he was striding toward me, his face set with something between frustration and pity. Relief flooded me at first. Maybe he'd noticed how out of place I felt, maybe he'd rescue me. Instead, he grabbed my wrist and pulled me into a dim hallway away from the crowd. "What's wrong?" I asked, startled. His face was inches from mine, his voice low but sharp enough to cut through the pounding bass. "I can't believe you're just standing there like that," he hissed, smiling like some awkward child. "Do you know how embarrassing that is?" The words didn't land at first. They hovered suspended in the air between us, waiting to pierce. I forced a small laugh, thinking I'd misheard him. "Daniel, I'm just trying to take it all in. It's a lot." "No," he snapped, his eyes filled with contempt I had never seen before. "You don't get it. You don't fit. You don't belong here. Look around. These are real people with passion, with drive. And you're just boring, safe, predictable. An embarrassment to be seen with." There it was, the knife delivered with precision. My smile crumbled. I felt my stomach twist into knots, my heart pounding against my ribs as if trying to escape. My throat closed up, words lodged behind a wall of disbelief. I stared at him, my Daniel, the man I had loved for half a decade, as though he'd turned into a stranger before my very eyes. He didn't wait for me to respond. With a dismissive shake of his head, he released my wrist and walked back into the blaring chaos, leaving me stranded in that narrow hallway, small and trembling. The music thumped on, indifferent. But for me, something inside had shattered, and I knew deep down, though I couldn't admit it yet, that our story was already ending. The ride home from that warehouse party was suffocating. Daniel drove with one hand on the wheel, his eyes fixed on the dark road ahead, his jaw tight. I sat in silence, staring out the window, the echo of his words pounding in my chest, an embarrassment to be seen with. We didn't speak, not once. The silence wasn't the comfortable kind that used to wrap around us after long days. It was heavy, hostile, like sitting in the middle of a storm without the sound of rain to break the tension. When we got home, Daniel went straight into the bedroom, closing the door with a soft but deliberate click. I stayed in the living room, still wearing my jacket, staring at the shadows dancing across the wall from the streetlight outside. I wanted to cry, to scream, to demand an explanation. But nothing came out, just silence. The next morning, he was already at the kitchen table when I walked in, a mug of coffee in his hand, a suitcase beside his chair. My stomach dropped. "Wendy," he began, his voice calm, too calm, like he'd rehearsed this. "I've been thinking, I don't think we're right for each other anymore." The words landed like glass, shattering on tile. My breath caught, but I kept my face still. "What do you mean?" My voice was steady, though I felt a tremor underneath. He looked at me with a detached kind of pity. "You're content with this life, and that's fine for you. But I can't stay stuck. I need passion. I need to grow, to live. And you—" He gestured vaguely around the apartment. "You're too comfortable, too predictable. It's suffocating." I blinked back tears, forcing myself not to break. "Is this about her?" I asked finally, my throat tight. His eyebrows twitched. "Who?" Sophia Wari said the name, tasting bitter. His new friend, the artist he'd been seeing almost daily. "Don't lie to me." His lips curled into something between a smirk and a scoff. This isn't about Sophia, this is about me. I've changed, Wendy. My priorities have shifted. You should understand that. Understand. My mind screamed at the hypocrisy, but I swallowed the rage. Instead, I asked, "So what happens now?" Daniel leaned back, sipping his coffee with maddening serenity. "You'll find someone else. Someone who wants what you want. Predictability routine. That's just not me anymore." My chest tightened, but my voice remained calm. "After 5 years, this is all I get. A lecture about how I bore you." He didn't answer. Instead, he set his mug down and walked into the bedroom. Moments later, he returned with a half-empty suitcase, the zipper straining against the edges. Something in me broke then, not in the way he expected, but in the opposite. A strange clarity washed over me. I realized begging wouldn't change his mind. Anger wouldn't make him stay. He had already left me long before this morning. So I did the only thing I could to protect what little dignity I had left. I walked to the closet, pulled out an old duffel bag, and started packing. A few clothes, my laptop, some books. My hands trembled, but I moved quickly, deliberately. Daniel froze, watching me. His eyes widened slightly, as if this wasn't the reaction he'd been expecting. "You're leaving?" he asked, disbelief flickering across his face. "Yes," I said simply. My voice was quiet but steady, the kind of tone that comes when pain turns into steel. He didn't stop me. Maybe he thought I'd come crawling back. Maybe he was too arrogant to imagine I could walk away without a fight. By noon, I was standing at my sister Marisol's doorstep, duffel bag slung over my shoulder. When she opened the door and saw my face, she didn't ask questions. She just pulled me into her arms and whispered, "You're home now." And just like that, the life I had built for 5 years was gone. All that was left behind was silence, betrayal, and the faint echo of a man who once loved me, telling me I was an embarrassment. But I didn't cry. Not yet. That part would come later in the dark when no one was watching. For now, I just let Marisol's embrace hold me up as I wondered what version of myself would rise from these ruins. The first night on Marisol's couch felt like sleeping in a stranger's skin. The cushions were soft, the blanket warm, but my body ached in ways comfort couldn't touch. Every time I closed my eyes, Daniel's words echoed back, "You're an embarrassment to be seen with." They circled my mind like vultures tearing at whatever scraps of self-worth I had left. Marisol never pressed me for details. She simply left a cup of tea on the coffee table each evening, and sometimes a gentle hand on my shoulder. She knew I needed space more than I needed questions. For that, I was grateful. Days blurred into nights. I worked, I ate, I existed, but nothing filled the hollow where Daniel's presence used to be. The silence was unbearable at first, so loud it rattled inside my head. I blocked his number, erased him from every social media feed, even logged out of accounts we had once shared. I wanted him gone, not just from my phone, but from my world. And yet the quiet was deceptive. It suffocated me at first, then slowly began to breathe life back into me. One evening, Marisol came home to find me in the kitchen. The oven light glowed, and inside was my lasagna, the one Daniel used to rave about. When it was ready, I sat down alone, slicing into the golden bubbling top. The taste was the same, but it carried no joy, no laughter, echoing from across the table. Each bite was heavy, like chewing on memories that no longer belonged to me. I pushed the plate away and whispered into the empty kitchen, never again, for him. Cooking once our shared ritual would become mine alone. Not a love language for someone else to dismiss, but a comfort I could reclaim for myself. Weeks passed, and with them came a small shift. I found a tiny one-bedroom apartment near my office. It was nothing grand, peeling paint in the bathroom creaky floorboards, but it was mine. On the first night, I lay on the new gray sofa I'd picked out myself, surrounded by unopened boxes. The space smelled faintly of cardboard and fresh paint. It didn't feel like home yet, but it felt like possibility. I set up my computer in the corner, something I hadn't touched in months. I cooked a simple meal, roast chicken with garlic, and ate it in silence, but this silence felt different. Not suffocating, not hostile, just mine. The hollow inside me hadn't disappeared, but piece by piece, I was filling it with fragments of a life that belonged only to me. Then the outside world began to intrude. A text arrived from Chris, a mutual friend. "Hey, Wendy, I know things ended badly with Daniel, but I thought you should know some stuff's going on with him." I stared at the screen, heart thumping. For a long moment, I hovered over the message, debating whether to open the door to his name again. But curiosity cracked the armor I had built. Chris's next text came through before I replied. "It's about Sophia. Things aren't what they seemed. I set the phone down, my breath shallow. For the first time in months, I felt a flicker of something besides grief, something sharp and uneasy. Maybe Daniel's perfect new world wasn't so perfect after all. Chris's message gnawed at me all night. I didn't reply, but I couldn't shake it either. By morning, another ping lit up my phone, this time a voicemail. Wendy, I just thought you should know. Daniel's not doing so great. Sophia. She walked out. Apparently, he wasn't who he said he was. I didn't need the details to know Chris was telling the truth. Something in my gut had sensed it all along. Daniel was chasing a life built on smoke. But the details came anyway. Sophia wasn't just his muse, she was his mirror, and she shattered it. She exposed him for what he was, a pretender, a trust fund man playing at being an artist, leeching off her circle until they saw through him. His friends drifted away as quickly as they had appeared. For weeks I listened silently as pieces of Daniel's downfall trickled into my orbit. Each message, each phone call from people I hadn't heard from in months carried the same undercurrent of shock. We thought he had it all. Turns out he had nothing. Lisa, another mutual friend, even called me directly. Her voice was tight, almost ashamed. Wendy, I owe you an apology. When you two split, I believed his version of the story, that you were holding him back, that you were small. Her pause crackled through the line, but now I see he was just running from himself. He's lost everything, and I mean everything. I listened, my lips pressed thin. There was a time I would have craved those words, vindication proof that I hadn't been the problem. But hearing them now, I felt nothing. No triumph, no joy, just a quiet, detached emptiness. Then the attempts to reach me began. First, an unfamiliar number. Wendy, it's me. Please just hear me out. I blocked it. Then another. I know I hurt you. Sophia was a mistake. She ruined me. Blocked. Finally, Daniel's desperation took shape in the voices of others. Chris texted again, exhausted. He won't stop talking about you. Says he wants you back. I don't know what to tell him anymore. My reply was a single word, no. The strangest part wasn't his persistence, it was my indifference. Months earlier, I would have collapsed at the sound of his name. Now, his voice barely stirred me. The same man who once defined my days was reduced to background noise I refused to turn up. But I'd be lying if I said there wasn't something haunting about it all, knowing he was unraveling while I was slowly, quietly stitching myself back together. There was one night, though, when I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror and whispered almost accusingly, "Why don't you feel anything?" I searched my own eyes, waiting for guilt or compassion to rise up. Instead, I saw a woman who had finally understood that not every wound needs closure. Some wounds simply close themselves with time, leaving scars you learn to wear. Still, a part of me braced for the inevitable. Daniel wasn't the type to let go easily. And if there was one thing I'd learned in 5 years with him, it was this. When his world collapsed, he would come crawling back to mine. And sooner or later he did. It was a quiet Sunday evening. My apartment smelled of roasted garlic and thyme, a simple chicken I had cooked just for myself. The windows were cracked open to let in the autumn air, and for the first time in months, I felt at peace in the stillness. Then 3 sharp knocks. I froze. No one ever came by unannounced. My friends knew better, and Marisol always called first. Slowly, I walked to the door, heart tightening, with a strange mix of dread and inevitability. When I opened it, there he was. Daniel, but not the Daniel I remembered. His clothes were wrinkled, his hair unkempt, his eyes hollow and bloodshot. The arrogant posture that once defined him was gone. In its place stood a man collapsed under his own mistakes. "Wendy," he breathed, his voice breaking. "Thank God you're here. I've been trying to reach you." I didn't move, didn't step aside. The smell of smoke and stale alcohol clung to him, invading the warm air of my doorway. "Please," he begged, his hands trembling. "I made a mistake. Sophia. She used me. She destroyed everything. But you were real. You loved me when no one else did. I see that now." The words fell between us like ash. Once they would have melted me. Now they only confirmed what I already knew. His love had been conditional, fleeting, selfish. I stepped back just enough for him to push his way inside. His eyes darted around my small apartment, taking in the new sofa, the tidy kitchen, the humming computer in the corner. Confusion flickered across his face, as though he couldn't reconcile this space with the woman he had once dismissed. "This is nice," he muttered, almost resentful. Then louder, more desperate, "Wendy, I need you. I miss us. I miss the way you took care of me." I stood in the center of the room, arms crossed. the calm in my chest, surprising even me. "Daniel," I said evenly, "why are you here?" His mask cracked. Anger flickered beneath the desperation. "Because you're supposed to forgive me. We were partners. You can't just throw that away." His voice cracked. "I know I hurt you, but I was lost. Can't you see that?" I shook my head slowly. "What I see is a man who chose his path. You wanted more than me, remember? More excitement, more risk. Well, you got it." He stepped closer, tears streaking his face. "Wendy, please, don't be so cold. I'm begging you." And then the memory surged back with sharp clarity, his sneer in that warehouse hallway, his voice dripping with contempt. "You're an embarrassment to be seen with." I met his eyes steady and unflinching. "You were right, Daniel. I was an embarrassment. And you wanted someone bigger, brighter, louder. You found her, and you lost her. That's not my burden to carry." His shoulders slumped, the fight draining out of him. He looked small, diminished. "I can change," he whispered. "No," I said firmly. "You won't. And even if you could, I wouldn't want you back. My life is peaceful now. It's mine. And you don't belong in it anymore." I walked to the door, pulled it open, and gestured outward. My face betrayed no anger, no joy, only finality. "This conversation is over." For a moment, he stood frozen disbelief clouding his eyes. Then slowly he walked past me, his footsteps heavy against the floor. I closed the door behind him with a quiet click, sealing him out of my home, my heart, my future. Silence settled again, deep and complete. I leaned against the door, breathing in the stillness, and for the first time in years I felt free, not just from him, but from the version of myself who once believed love meant holding on, no matter how much it hurt. I walked back into my kitchen, plated my dinner, and sat down. The food was still warm, and for the first time in a long time, it tasted like peace. "My name is Janet Baxter. I'm 28 years old. I work in logistics for a mid-sized distribution company. It's not glamorous, but it's solid. Good pay, benefits, and a sense of security, the kind of job that lets you save money, plan ahead, dream about a future. That's what I wanted: stability. A foundation strong enough to build a life on. For the past 2 years, I thought I had that with Ryan. Ryan was 26, ambitious, always chasing the next big thing. He worked in marketing at a tech startup downtown. His days were filled with late meetings, brand launches, networking events. He loved the spotlight, and I admired how he seemed to thrive in it. I thought our differences balanced each other, his fire, my steadiness. We'd been living together for 8 months in a modest one-bedroom apartment, shared chores, split rent, whispered about bigger places and brighter futures. At least I thought we did. Quietly, I'd been saving for an engagement ring, nearly $8,000 tucked away. Not too flashy, but something meaningful. I had already booked a cabin in Colorado, mapped out a hiking trail ending at a scenic overlook. I pictured it perfectly. Ryan would say yes, and we'd have the kind of proposal story he could brag about for years. But as I was planning forever, he was planning something else. At first, I thought it was stress. His startup was deep in a funding round. He was exhausted, distracted, always glued to his phone. Nights stretched later and later with urgent dinners and networking events. But then came the changes, subtle at first. The smell of expensive cologne that wasn't his. The way he criticized little things. My jeans were too relaxed, my friends lacked ambition, even the restaurants I picked were trying too hard. And always the name Derek. Derek thinks we should pivot our strategy. Derek got us into this exclusive dinner. Derek says I have potential. Derek, Derek, Derek. I laughed once, trying to make it light. Sounds like you've got a work husband. Ryan didn't laugh. 3 weeks ago, I lit candles on the dinner table, cooked his favorite meal. I was desperate to pull us back to remind him of what we had. He walked in, glanced at the setup, and his face hardened. "Janet, we need to talk." My chest tightened. "Are we okay?" "No," he said flat. "We're not. I don't think this is working anymore." I reached for him. "Ryan, we can fix." "Stop!" He raised his hand sharp, cutting me off. Then came the words that shattered me. "I settled for you because I thought I couldn't do better. Turns out I was wrong." It felt like the floor disappeared beneath me. "How long?" I whispered. 3 months. He didn't hesitate. "It's not a fling. Derek is what I should have waited for." The name slammed into me like a door. I walked to the bedroom, opened my sock drawer, and pulled out the small velvet box I'd hidden for months. I placed it on the table between us. "I was going to propose next month in Colorado. Guess you saved us both the embarrassment." His eyes flickered with something, guilt maybe, but he didn't apologize. Instead, he said, "I'm moving in with Derek. I already found someone to take my half of the lease." And just like that, he was gone. I didn't scream, didn't cry in front of him. I gathered some clothes, stuffed them into a bag, and left. The night air outside stung my skin, but the silence inside me was worse. As I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel, I realized the man I thought I'd marry had been gone long before tonight. But something else lingered sharp and quiet deep in my chest. This wasn't just an ending. It was the beginning of a story Ryan would never see coming. I don't remember much of the drive to Nina's that night. My body moved on autopilot while my mind screamed in circles. I replayed Ryan's words, his calmness, his certainty, the casual cruelty of saying he had settled for me. When I walked through Nina's door with a duffel bag slung over my shoulder, she didn't need an explanation. One look at my face, and she pulled me into her arms. "Janet, what happened?" The words tumbled out of me. Ryan Derrick, the breakup, the velvet box on the table. I felt like I was narrating someone else's tragedy. My voice sounded hollow, like it belonged to a stranger. Nina held me tighter. "That man's an idiot. One day he'll regret this. But don't you waste your regret on him." Her certainty was a small comfort, like a warm blanket that couldn't quite stop the cold. That night, I lay awake on her couch, staring at the ceiling. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Ryan's expression, detached, almost bored, as though ending us was no more significant than canceling a subscription. I clenched my fists against the ache. I had loved him with my whole heart, and all along he had been drafting his exit strategy. The next morning, I made the call I'd been dreading. "Hi, yes, I need to return an engagement ring. It's unused." The jeweler's voice was polite, but I imagined judgment hiding between the syllables. "Of course, ma'am. We can process that refund for you." Unused. The word burned. With the refund, I paid off my car loan. Practical, necessary, but it felt like taking money that was meant to symbolize love and repurposing it into something cold and functional. When I hung up, I stared at my phone for a long time. I could call Ryan. I could scream demand answers, ask him if Derek was worth what he threw away. But what would be the point? Instead, I blocked his number, deleted him from social media, not out of revenge, not even really out of anger, just to breathe, to exist without constant reminders of what I'd lost. But still his shadow lingered. At work, people noticed. "You seem quieter," my coworker Jamie said one afternoon, her voice tentative. "Just tired," I lied. But it wasn't just fatigue. It was grief gnawing and relentless. Everywhere I turned, there were reminders. The coffee shop where Ryan and I used to sit on Sundays. The grocery aisle where we'd argue about cereal brands. Even the silence of my own phone, which once buzzed constantly with his messages, now mocking me with its stillness. And yet beneath the grief, something else began to stir. A thin thread of anger weaving itself tighter each day. Not the explosive kind, but a steady burn that refused to die out. Nina saw it too. One evening, as we sat with mugs of tea, she studied me carefully. "You're holding yourself together better than I expected," she said. "I don't feel like it," I admitted. Inside, it's like glass shards scraping every time I breathe. "That's normal. But Janet, listen to me. You're stronger than he ever gave you credit for. Don't you dare let him define you." Her words lodged in me like seeds. I didn't believe them yet, but some part of me wanted to. Days turned into weeks. The fog of heartbreak didn't vanish, but it shifted, making room for other things. I threw myself into work, volunteered for projects no one else wanted, spent hours untangling logistical nightmares until my brain was too tired to think about Ryan. It wasn't glamorous, but it was something I could control. My boss noticed. "Janet, you've been knocking it out of the park lately," he said in a meeting. "Keep this up, and we'll have to start talking about bigger responsibilities." I nodded, but inside a tiny flicker of pride sparked. For so long, my energy had gone into keeping Ryan happy. Now that energy belonged to me. Still, the nights were the hardest. Alone in Nina's guest room, I sometimes scrolled through old photos, us smiling at a concert, Ryan's arm around me, on a beach, the two of us decorating a Christmas tree. Each image felt like a lie, frozen in time. One night, against my better judgment, I typed his name into the search bar. His profile was private, but Derek's wasn't. There, they were smiling at some rooftop bar, Ryan's hand casually resting on Derek's shoulder. My stomach twisted equal parts nausea and rage. I shut the laptop with a snap. No, I wasn't going to do this. I had already given Ryan too much of my time, my love, my life. He had chosen Derek. Fine. But I wasn't going to keep choosing him in his absence. The weeks stretched on, and slowly the rawness dulled. I started running with Nina's boyfriends group. At first, I could barely keep up, lungs burning, legs heavy. But there was something addictive about the rhythm, the four Baxter motion. Step after step, breath after breath. It felt like proof that I was still alive, still moving. I rediscovered books I'd abandoned, filled journals with half-finished thoughts, even took weekend drives to small towns just to see what was there. Little by little, I stitched myself back together. And yet late at night, when the house was quiet, I'd still hear his voice. I settled for you. I was wrong. The words echoed like a haunting refrain. But gradually, the echo lost some of its power. One evening, Nina caught me staring out the window, lost in thought. "You're thinking about him again," she said gently. I nodded. I can't stop replaying it, wondering if I missed the signs earlier, if I could have done something different. Nina shook her head. "Janet, stop torturing yourself. The only person who could have changed anything was Ryan. He made his choice. Now it's time for you to make yours." Her words hit me harder than I expected. Because she was right. I couldn't rewrite the past, but maybe I could decide what came next. The next morning, as I walked into work, something shifted. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was preparing. Preparing for a life without him. Preparing for a version of myself he had never seen, never believed in. I thought Ryan was out of my life for good. I was wrong. They say time heals. That's not true. Time doesn't heal anything. It only gives you space to decide what to do with the wound. For me, the wound was Ryan. But instead of bleeding out forever, I decided to stitch it closed in my own way. Work became my anchor. I volunteered for every tough project, every late-night assignment. Logistics isn't glamorous. It's spreadsheets, schedules, and solving endless puzzles about moving goods from point A to B. But with Ryan out of my head, I realized I was actually good at it. Really good. Problems that used to terrify me, trucks delayed warehouses, short-staffed suppliers arguing, now felt like challenges I could conquer. My boss started giving me projects no one else wanted, and I nailed them. Slowly, a new identity formed, not Janet Ryan's girlfriend. Just Janet. Competent, resilient, valuable. Outside of work, I started saying yes to things I used to avoid. Nina dragged me to her boyfriend's group workouts. The first morning, I nearly collapsed after 10 minutes gasping for breath while sweat stung my eyes. "You can quit any time," Nina teased, half smiling. "No," I said between gulps of air. "I'm not quitting." Step by step, rep by rep, I built strength. I didn't know I had. There was something cathartic about pushing my body until it hurt, until the ache drowned out the echo of Ryan's voice. And somewhere between the treadmill and the weights, I noticed something shift. I wasn't exercising for revenge. I wasn't imagining running into Ryan looking glamorous and strong. I was just doing it for me. That realization hit harder than any workout. Weekends became mine again. I visited museums I'd long wanted to see. Wandered through art exhibits Ryan would have called pretentious. Took spontaneous drives through small towns, sipping coffee in diners, with peeling wallpaper, talking to strangers about nothing and everything. Each trip was like reclaiming a piece of myself I hadn't even realized I'd given up. At first, it felt strange being alone making choices without considering someone else's opinion. But then I noticed how freeing it was. I didn't need to filter myself through Ryan's ambition anymore. I didn't need his approval to feel worthwhile. And slowly, painfully, I began to like the silence. 3 months after the breakup, my boss called me into his office. "Janet, you've been doing exceptional work," he said, leaning back in his chair. "How would you feel about stepping into an operations manager role? Better pay, more responsibility." My heart raced. Me, a manager. A year ago, I wouldn't have believed I was capable. I would have called Ryan immediately, eager to share the good news, desperate for his validation. But Ryan was gone, and I didn't need his validation anymore. I smiled. I'd feel ready. That night, instead of crying over what I'd lost, I took myself out to dinner. A quiet celebration, just me, a glass of wine, and the knowledge that I was building a future on my own terms. Around that time, Nina convinced me to join her and her boyfriend at a birthday party for a mutual friend. I almost didn't go. I still hated small talk, still dreaded the awk Baxter question. "So are you seeing anyone?" But that's the night I met Adam. Adam wasn't flashy. He wasn't the kind of man who dominated a room with his ambition. Instead, he carried a calmness that felt rare. He was a pediatric nurse, soft-spoken with warm eyes, and an easy laugh that made the people around him relax. We ended up talking for hours in a corner away from the chaos of the party. "So what do you do?" he asked, genuinely curious. "I work in logistics. Basically, I make sure shipments get where they're supposed to be on time." His eyes lit up. "That sounds really important. I bet people don't realize how much planning goes into just making life run smoothly." I almost laughed. After years of Ryan treating my job like a joke, here was someone who actually saw value in it. We talked about books, about places we wanted to travel, about his volunteer work on weekends. There was no pressure to impress, no subtle criticism hidden in his compliments, just conversation. When I left that night, I caught myself smiling on the drive home. A real smile, not the forced one I'd been wearing for months. But with that smile came fear. Could I trust again? Could I open my heart without the constant dread of betrayal? Ryan had left scars I couldn't ignore. Late at night, doubts crept in. What if Adam turns out like him? What if I'm fooled again? Nina noticed. "You're scared," she said one evening as we folded laundry together. "Of course I'm scared," I admitted. "I thought I knew Ryan. I thought I knew us. And look how that turned out." Nina placed a hand on my arm. "Scars don't mean you can't love again. They just mean you'll love smarter this time. Adam's not Ryan. And you're not the same Janet anymore either." Her words lingered. She was right. I wasn't the same woman who once bent over Baxter to earn Ryan's approval. But was I ready to prove it? Adam didn't push. He texted me, casually asked if I wanted to grab coffee, invited me on a hike. His patience was disarming. One morning, as we stood overlooking a quiet lake, he said something that stuck with me. "You don't have to be anything other than who you are. That's enough." It was such a simple sentence, but it felt revolutionary. I thought about Ryan, how he had made me feel small, unworthy, like I had to constantly prove my value. Adam, in contrast, saw me as enough exactly as I was. And for the first time in a long while, I let myself believe that maybe I was. By the end of that summer, my life looked different. I had a new title at work, a stronger body, a clearer sense of who I was, and maybe, just maybe, the beginnings of something real with Adam. But happiness is fragile, and sometimes the past doesn't let go so easily. Because just when I thought I'd closed the chapter on Ryan, he came back. It started small. A text from an unknown number one Wednesday morning. "Ryan, hey, how are you doing?" I stared at the screen for a long time, thumb hovering over the reply button. A few months ago, I would have dropped everything. My heart would have raced, desperate to read between the lines. But now all I felt was annoyance, like a mosquito buzzing around my ear. I blocked the number without responding. For a few blissful weeks, I believed that was the end of it. But Ryan didn't give up so easily. The next message came through email. "I hope you're doing well. I just wanted to check in." Check in. As if he was some distant relative, not the man who had gutted me with 8 words. "I settled for you. I was wrong." Delete, block, move on. I thought it was over. Until one afternoon, my desk phone rang. Janet Baxter, Logistics. A pause, then a voice I hadn't heard in months. "Janet, it's me. Please don't hang up." My grip on the receiver tightened. "Ryan, I'm at work." "I know, and I'm sorry to call you here, but I need to say this. I made a huge mistake. Derek. He wasn't what I thought. The company's falling apart. He's broke, and he's been seeing other people. I should never have left you. Can we talk?" I almost laughed at the irony. The man who once looked down on my steady job, my simple weekends, was now scrambling as his shiny world collapsed. I took a steady breath. "Ryan, I'm seeing someone now. I hope you figure things out. But this conversation is over." And I hung up. My hands trembled, but not from longing, from release. That night I told Adam. His brow furrowed. "Are you okay?" "Yes," I said honestly, "surprisingly okay." He studied me for a moment, then nodded. "Good. But Janet, people like Ryan, they don't always stop when you ask them to." I wanted to argue, but deep down I knew Adam was right. A month later, I left work late, the parking lot nearly empty. As I approached my car, I saw a figure leaning against it. Ryan. For a moment, I didn't recognize him. The polished, confident man I once loved was gone. His suit looked wrinkled, his hair unkempt, and there was a desperation in his eyes that chilled me. "I just need 5 minutes," he pleaded. "Please." I crossed my arms. 5 minutes to say what? That you regret leaving, that Derek wasn't your dream man after all. "Congratulations, Ryan, you've discovered karma." He winced. "I know I deserve that. But I swear, Janet, I see it now. You were everything. You were steady, loyal, real. I was stupid chasing something shallow. Please give me another chance." For a moment, I just looked at him, waiting for the old ache to rise the pull of what we once had. But there was nothing. "I used to dream about you saying those words," I admitted. "But now they mean nothing. I'm not that woman anymore." His face crumpled. "Don't say that." "It's the truth." I stepped past him, unlocked my car, and slid inside. He called my name, but I drove away without looking back. When I told Nina what happened, her jaw tightened. "That's what I was afraid of," she said. "Men like him don't like losing. He's going to keep pushing, Janet. You need to be careful. Careful, I scoffed. He's pathetic. He has nothing left to offer me. Nina gave me a sharp look. Don't underestimate a man with nothing left. Desperation makes people reckless. Her warning lodged in my chest. That night, lying awake beside Adam, I whispered, "What if he doesn't stop?" Adam shifted closer, wrapping an arm around me. "Then we deal with it together. You're not alone in this anymore." His steady heartbeat against my back grounded me. Still unease curled in my stomach. The weeks passed, and I tried to focus on moving for Baxter. Adam and I grew closer, our relationship deepening in ways that felt natural, unforced. He made me laugh on grocery runs, left notes in my lunch, asked about my day, and actually listened. Small gestures, but they built something real, something Ryan could never have given me. One evening, as Adam cooked dinner in my kitchen, I caught myself watching him, hair slightly messy, humming off key, focused on stirring the sauce. And I realized this was happiness. Not flashy, not Instagram-worthy, just quiet, genuine happiness. I smiled to myself. Ryan's shadow was finally fading. Or so I thought. 2 weeks later, Nina pulled me aside after yoga class. Her face was pale. "You're not going to like this," she said. But Ryan showed up at the cafe where I was working. He asked about you. Said he just wanted to know if you were happy. My stomach dropped. "And what did you say?" I told him, "Yes, you're happy. Happier than ever. And that he needed to leave you alone." I wanted to believe that would be enough. But as I walked to my car that evening, I couldn't shake the feeling of eyes on me lingering just out of sight. One night, Adam found me pacing the living room, arms folded tight. "What's wrong?" he asked. "Ryan," I admitted. "He keeps circling. Texts, calls, waiting outside. Now he's bothering Nina. It's like he can't accept that it's over." Adam placed his hands on my shoulders. "Then you need to tell him clearly. Not just no, not just silence, but the truth. The final truth." I looked into Adam's eyes, steady and unwavering, and realized he was right. I'd been avoiding it, hoping Ryan would disappear on his own. But some endings require more than silence. They require confrontation. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. At the next company event, as I laughed with colleagues and Adam by my side, I felt it a shift in the air. I turned, and there he was. Ryan, standing near the entrance, eyes locked on me, as though the rest of the room didn't exist. My pulse quickened, but this time it wasn't fear. It was anticipation. The past had resurfaced, clawing its way back into my present. But I wasn't the same woman he had left behind. And if Ryan wanted his 5 minutes, this time I was ready. The night Ryan showed up at my company's networking event, I felt the air in the room shift the moment his eyes met mine. He looked thinner, older somehow. The confidence that used to drip off him in waves was gone, replaced by something rawer, desperation. "Janet," he said, approaching cautiously, like I might vanish if he stepped too quickly. "Please, just hear me out." Adam stiffened beside me. I touched his arm. "It's fine. I'll handle this." I turned to Ryan. 5 minutes. That's all you get. We stepped out onto the balcony, the city lights glowing like distant stars below us. The glass door shut, muting the hum of conversation inside. Ryan rubbed a hand over his face. "I was such an idiot. I chased someone who didn't care about me, not really. Derek, he used me. The company's gone. The investors pulled out. He's already with someone else." He looked at me, eyes wet. "You were the one, Janet. You always were. Loyal, steady, kind. I threw it away because I was shallow and blind. Please, give me another chance." For a moment, I studied him. This was everything I used to fantasize about, that he'd wake up, regret it, beg to come back. I thought hearing it would heal me. But instead, I felt nothing. No rush of relief, no flicker of hope, just emptiness. "Ryan," I said softly, "do you know how many nights I wished you would say those words? I cried myself to sleep, begging the universe to make you see me again. And now that you're here saying it..." I shook my head. "I don't care anymore." His face crumpled. "Don't say that. It's the truth. I loved you once. I would have given you everything. But the woman who loved you doesn't exist anymore." He reached for my hand. I pulled back instantly. "Janet, I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I swear I can be different." Different. My laugh was sharp, bitter. "You didn't just break my heart, Ryan. You made me doubt myself. You made me believe I wasn't enough, that I had to earn love by shrinking who I was. And now you want me to believe you've changed." His mouth opened, but no words came. "I don't hate you," I added, "but I don't want you. That's my closure." I turned and walked back inside without looking at his face. Adam was waiting, worry etched across his features. "You okay?" I exhaled a long, shaky breath. "Yes, more than okay. I finally feel free." Adam smiled faintly, slipping his hand into mine. "Good." Because he's not worth even a fraction of you. I squeezed his hand. I know that now. For weeks after Ryan tried again, a text congratulating me on my promotion, a voicemail asking if we could meet just as friends, a LinkedIn message about some job lead. But each time I blocked, deleted, moved on. It wasn't anger anymore, it was clarity. Ryan had been the storm that wrecked me, but Adam was the calm that showed me I could rebuild. Adam and I grew closer. We weren't rushing into anything, but everything felt different with him. Real, steady, the kind of relationship where laughter came easily, where silence wasn't uncomfortable, where support was given freely without scorekeeping. One evening, we were cooking together in my kitchen, me chopping vegetables, him stirring sauce when he paused, glancing at me. Does it bother you that Ryan keeps trying to contact you? I considered the question. Not really, more like confusion. He once told me he settled for me, and now he's begging for another chance. It's ironic, but it doesn't hurt anymore. It just makes me wonder why he'd want to settle again. Adam stirred the sauce thoughtfully. Maybe he finally realized that settling for a good person isn't settling at all. I smiled faintly. Maybe. But the truth is, I'm not that woman anymore. The one who needed his approval. I've outgrown her. And him. Adam leaned down and kissed my forehead. Good. Because I happen to like the Janet you are now. For the first time in months, I believed him. A few months later, Adam surprised me with a quiet dinner on the beach. No flash, no staged photos, no spectacle. Just us, the ocean, and a ring he had chosen because it reminded him of me, not because it would impress anyone else. Janet Baxter, he said, kneeling in the sand. Will you marry me? Tears pricked my eyes. Yes, I whispered. It wasn't the proposal I once envisioned in the Colorado mountains. It was better. Because it was real. When we planned our engagement party, I kept the guest list small, close friends, family, Nina, of course. I wanted warmth, not spectacle. The night of the party, as Adam and I laughed with loved ones in the glow of string lights, I felt a peace I hadn't known in years. Until I saw her. A figure at the entrance, dressed in black, scanning the room like she was searching for something she had lost. Ryan. Uninvited. My chest tightened. I'd told myself he was finished, that I'd made my closure clear. But here he was, at my engagement party, dragging the past into my future. Adam followed my gaze and immediately stiffened. Do you want me to handle this? I shook my head slowly. No, this time, I'll end it myself. I excused myself from the group, walking across the room with steady steps. Ryan's eyes locked onto mine, filled with something I couldn't quite name. Longing, regret, maybe desperation. Janet, he whispered. I had to see it for myself. You're really doing this. Yes, I said firmly. I am. And you need to leave. He looked past me to Baxter Adam. She seems nice. Very different from me. She is, I said simply. Ryan's voice cracked. Do you ever think about what we could have been if I hadn't screwed it up? I paused, staring at him, really staring. And I realized there was no love left, no hate, not even anger, just emptiness. No, Ryan, I said finally. I don't think about what we could have been. I know what we were, and that's enough to never go back. Behind me, I heard the clink of glasses, Adam's laugh. Nina's voice calling my name. My life. My future. Ryan's shoulders sagged. He looked smaller than I'd ever seen him. For a moment, I almost pitied him. Almost. But then I turned my back. Because some doors aren't meant to stay open. The clinking of glasses, bursts of laughter, the warm glow of string lights. Our engagement party felt like a dream. My parents were chatting happily with Adam's family. Nina was making jokes at the center of a small crowd, and Adam was standing beside me, hand resting lightly on my back. Everything felt right. Everything felt safe. Until I saw Ryan. He lingered at the entrance, dressed in a black suit that probably cost more than he could afford now. His eyes scanned the room, restless as though searching for something he'd lost long ago. My stomach tightened. He had no right to be here. Adam noticed my expression, followed my gaze, and stiffened. Do you want me to handle this? He asked quietly. I shook my head. No, this is mine to finish. I crossed the room slowly, each step steady, deliberate. When Ryan saw me, his lips curved into a sad smile. I had to see it for myself, he said softly. You're really doing this. Yes, I replied firmly. I am. And you need to leave. He ignored the command, his gaze flicking to Baxter Adam across the room. She seems nice. Very different from me. She is, I said simply. Something flickered across his face. Envy, maybe, or resignation. Do you ever think about what we could have been, if I hadn't screwed it up? I studied him. For months I had imagined this moment, wondered how I would feel. Anger, vindication. Regret. But as I looked at him, I felt Nothing. No fire, no ache, not even hatred. Just a dull emptiness where love used to live. No, Ryan, I said finally. I don't think about what we could have been. I know what we were, and that's enough to never go back. At that moment, Adam returned, carrying 2 glasses of wine. He stopped beside me, his presence calm and grounding. You must be Ryan, Adam said gently. His tone wasn't mocking, just steady. I've heard about you. Ryan swallowed, clearly thrown by Adam's composure. And you must be the one who gets the better version of her. Adam glanced at me, then back at him. No, I just get the real version of her, the one who doesn't need to shrink herself to be loved. His words landed like a final nail in a coffin. Ryan's mouth opened, but no reply came. He lowered his gaze, shoulders sagging. For the first time, he looked defeated. Emma, no, not Emma. Me, Janet. I caught myself correcting the thought. I was no longer the woman Ryan defined. I slipped my hand into Adam's and turned to Baxter Ryan one last time. You were right about one thing I said. You were settling. But so was I. The difference is, I learned from it. You didn't. Ryan blinked, as though the words pierced deeper than anything else I could have said. For a long moment, silence stretched between us. The hum of the party swelled behind me, our friends laughing, glasses toasting Nina's voice, bright and clear. My world, my future. And Ryan, he was just outside of it. To my surprise, Adam extended one of the glasses of wine to Baxter Ryan. Congratulations, he said calmly, on realizing what you lost. That kind of clarity doesn't come cheap. Ryan hesitated, then shook his head. No, I don't deserve that. You're right, Adam replied evenly, but Janet deserves peace, so give her that and leave. Ryan's eyes met mine. I held his gaze steady and unflinching. After a long pause, he nodded once. Take care, Janet, he murmured, and then he turned and walked away. I didn't watch him go. When the door closed behind him, Adam squeezed my hand. Was that hard for you? He asked quietly. I thought about it. Really thought. Not really, I said at last. I barely recognized him. And it was true. The Ryan I once loved, the one who had charmed me, held me, promised me forever, no longer existed. He had vanished long before tonight. The man who stood at my party was a stranger who once had the power to break me, but no longer could. I turned back to the celebration to my family, my friends, my future husband. The music swelled, glasses clinked, and Nina raised her voice for a toast. To Janet and Adam she called. May their future be brighter than any of us can imagine. The room erupted in cheers. Adam slipped his arm around my waist, pulling me close. As I looked out at the faces of the people who mattered, I felt something powerful settle in my chest. Closure. Real, unshakable closure. Ryan's chapter in my life had ended not with a fight, not with tears, but with a quiet certainty. And as the night stretched on, filled with laughter and warmth, I realized something else. The best revenge isn't anger. It isn't proving him wrong. It's being genuinely, irrevocably happy. And I was. Later that night, as Adam and I drove home, I rested my head against his shoulder. Do you think he'll try again? I asked softly. Adam's hand tightened around mine. Maybe. But it won't matter, because you're not the same Janet who once waited for his approval. I smiled faintly, staring out at the dark road ahead. No, I'm not. And I'll never be her again. The headlights cut through the night, illuminating the path for Baxter. Behind us, the door had closed on everything I used to think I wanted. Ahead of us, the future waited. And for the first time in years, I was ready to run to Baxter it. The morning after our engagement party, sunlight spilled through the curtains, painting the walls in soft gold. I lay in bed listening to Adam's steady breathing beside me and thought about how different this felt from the mornings I used to have with Ryan. With Ryan, mornings were rushed, him glued to his phone, already chasing the next deal, the next connection, barely noticing if I'd made coffee. I used to think that was normal, that love was about fitting yourself into the empty spaces of someone else's schedule. But with Adam, mornings weren't rushed. They were slow, warm, filled with quiet rituals. Coffee shared, hands, brushing in the kitchen, laughter about nothing in particular. And that was when it hit me. Happiness isn't supposed to feel like begging for scraps. It's supposed to feel like breathing. Over the weeks that followed, life fell into a rhythm I hadn't known I needed. We toured venues for the wedding, not ballrooms or grand hotels, but gardens and cozy barns. I didn't care about impressing anyone anymore. I just wanted a day that felt like us. Nina helped me choose a dress. As she zipped me into a simple ivory gown, she smiled through tears. "You look radiant," she whispered. I turned to the mirror. For a heartbeat, I didn't recognize the woman staring back. Not because of the dress, but because of the confidence in her posture, the quiet strength in her eyes. This was Janet Baxter, 28. Not the woman Ryan had called safe. Not the girl who once believed she had to shrink herself to deserve love. This was me whole and unafraid. But healing isn't a straight line. Some nights shadows crept back. I'd catch myself replaying the breakup, hearing Ryan's voice, "I settled for you. I was wrong." And I would feel a flicker of old pain like a scar aching in the cold. One evening, as Adam and I sat on the porch, watching the sun dip behind the trees, I admitted, "Sometimes I still hear him. In my head, I hate that he left scars." Adam turned to me, his expression gentle. "Scars don't mean you're broken, Janet. They mean you healed." He reached for my hand. "And you don't have to erase the past to move for Baxter. You just have to decide it doesn't control you anymore." His words settled over me like a balm. I squeezed his hand back, letting the truth sink in. A few weeks later, I ran into Ryan one final time. It was at a grocery store of all places. He stood in the canned goods aisle, hair disheveled, cart, half empty. When he saw me, his eyes widened, then softened with something like longing. "Janet," he breathed, "you look different." "I am different," I said calmly. He hesitated, then asked, "Are you happy?" For a moment, I considered lying, but then I realized I didn't need to. "Yes," I said, "I am." He nodded slowly, gaze dropping. "Good. I hope you stay that way." And just like that, he turned and walked away. No pleading, no speeches, just silence. It was the first time I'd seen him accept the truth, and in that silence, I felt something shift. The past had finally let go of me. On our wedding day, as I walked down the aisle to Baxter, Adam, I caught Nina's eye. She smiled, her expression, saying everything words couldn't. "You made it. You chose better. You chose yourself." Adam's eyes met mine, steady and warm, and for the first time in my life, I felt entirely certain. Not about perfection, not about guarantees, but about love, the kind that doesn't demand you prove your worth, the kind that grows instead of shrinks you. When I said I do, I wasn't just promising Adam forever. I was promising myself something too. Never again would I settle for less than I deserved. Later that night, as the celebration wound down, I slipped outside for a moment of quiet. The air was cool, filled with the faint hum of cicadas. I closed my eyes, listening to the laughter spilling from the reception hall behind me. For so long, I thought closure would come from Ryan, his apology, his regret, his acknowledgement of what he lost. But closure had never been about him. It had always been about me, about choosing to stop looking back. And as I stood there in the night air, I finally understood. The door had closed on everything I used to think I wanted, and I had never been happier to walk away. Inside, Adam called my name. I turned, heart swelling, and walked back to Baxter, the light, to Baxter, the people who loved me, to Baxter, the life I was building. Behind me, the shadows of the past faded. Ahead, the future glowed bright and unshakable. And this time, I wasn't afraid to run straight into it.